Hello. Thank you for taking the time to join me. I'm grateful. And I want to continue with the mysticism series. Mysticism is basically understanding, the deep mysteries of life beyond what you can see with the eye. And so in this part, I want to talk about the mysteries of what we have in our body, and that is the blood. So traditionally, there was sacrifices to the gods in terms of blood sacrifice, and there was some significance to this. Blood has a big influence in how you think and how you act, and also the type of behaviors that you take. Sometimes your behavior is influenced by the sort of information or the imprint of information that was left by the people before you, your ancestors, because whatever the people in the past did, it leaves a memory in the cells. You'll find that some of the characteristics of your grandfather or your father, all right, you'll find that you have those characteristics because you're living off the memory of their past, all right, their traumas, their experiences, and you're borrowing from their memory. But blood also goes beyond the physical into the metaphysical, in that blood is the medium through which the astral consciousness lives in the body. And so understanding this, I'm going to explore it in two parts. That is the blood as a medium of thought and intelligence, and then the blood as a medium of consciousness. Blood, as we know, it has cells, and these cells have their own memory. And our astral consciousness, which is a huge part of us, all right, without your astral consciousness, you are as good as a zombie, okay? So the astral consciousness, that is the part of you that was there before birth. It takes its residence in the blood. So consciousness is basically contained within the blood. Even in blood transfusion, people reportedly can experience a change in personality, and this is because of the mixing of consciousness. In my first video, I talked about consciousness merging, and so during transfusion, when you take in the blood of someone, you take a part of their consciousness and you integrate it with yourself. And if they have a powerful consciousness, it's most likely that you're going to experience their influence in your personality. And so this is why some people after blood transfusion, they tend to feel like they are a different person. Now, some people say that, hey, science doesn't prove that. And I would say that science doesn't prove the other way either. People who have done some just basic empirical research, they have been able to find that some of the people who received blood transfusion, they experienced a change in their personality in one way or another. And that in itself is an explanation as to how blood is a host of consciousness. And secondly, traditionally, we had the practice of animal sacrifice, all right, blood sacrifice to gods, all right, different types of gods. People think that even if it is written in these books that, God wanted to eat something, right, which does not make sense. Mainly in these offerings, the emphasis was on offering blood. That is because you're offering the life of the animal, okay, the consciousness that lives in the animal, and not the animal. Remember, there are metaphysical beings, all right, around us, and by giving them this offering, they feed on the astral consciousness that resides in the animal that has been sacrificed. And like I've said, that consciousness resides in the blood. And so these beings or gods, all right, that were made sacrifices to, it was more of an honor for them to receive that because they feed off that astral consciousness, and then they integrate it with their metaphysical bodies, and then that way they are able to live. And even in some traditions, there is often the emphasis of honoring the people who have passed, all right, through these festivities of sacrifices, and it's figuratively often done to keep them alive. When you think about people who are of the past, all right, because once someone has passed away, the more their memory starts to fade off us, it's more like they also start fading off completely, even in the astral realms. And so these traditions often emphasize that, hey, it's very much important to honor the ancestors, because by doing that, all right, by feeding them, all right, that astral conscious life in the form of sacrifice, then these beings were able now to live on and to keep guiding them and helping them and giving them the intelligence that they need to thrive as a community. That in a way also emphasizes another important point, that we as human beings, we are in a way magicians, all right? We were given the dominion over the physical things. And so some of these astral beings, they tend to admire what we have, and they can try to create relationships with us so that we can give them what they need, their nourishment. And I'm never going to judge whether that is a good or a bad thing, okay? But these are simply offerings to gods, all right? Small gods. The God who created everything would have no need to feed on an animal in order to fulfill whatever duty it has on earth. And again, one thing that has been common traditionally is the practice of mixing of blood, all right, in either traditions or even in modern secret societies and fraternities. There's that practice of mixing of blood in rituals. It often puts a tie, all right, a bind between the two people who merge their blood. And so in blood brotherhoods, all right, for example, traditionally even in scouting, there was often that practice of mixing drops of blood and people consuming the water, all right, where that blood has been mixed as a way of binding their consciousness. It's more of an esoteric practice, all right, more close to witchcraft, right, because blood is often a tool in witchcraft as well, so that they can remain loyal to each other. Now, gentlemen, if I may diverge a bit, the seeing blood every month for a woman, it often causes trauma. For us gentlemen, we barely see a drop of blood from ourselves, but for the woman, she sees blood every month. And in that way, we can't expect that the woman and the man will often have the same temperament. It is because by seeing blood consistently, often it also has an impact on you psychologically. It leaves some sort of trauma, and that is why before a woman learns how to master how to deal with this confusing energy, all right, she might seem a bit unstable and her actions might seem a bit irrational. But for the woman, once she has mastered herself and, the sight of seeing blood every time has become normal to her, then she's able to integrate very well and will still suffer some psychological disturbances, right, on some days, but eventually they learn how to manage it and become well. And even for the people who slaughter animals, right, the butchers, they encounter blood in several instances while slaughtering animals. And that is not a good thing, because besides the violence that is committed to shed blood, it comes to influence them in a negative way. Even traditionally, the people who are, for example, when they went to war, the people who are fierce killers, they had that look in them that when another person just looks at it, they know that, hey, this one is trouble. This one can take life at the split of a second. And also, again, the traditions where blood is consumed, right? Over here in Kenya, we have tribes that consume blood. But anyway, I'm speaking generally. Traditionally, there are communities that consumed blood as a way to make them fierce in war. That is because by consuming blood, you become more violent. Because remember, like I've said, before blood can be shed, there has to be violence. And that violence committed onto the animal will often leave an imprint on the blood. And so whoever consumes this raw will often become more violent. And in one of the religions, they emphasize the importance of draining all the blood after slaughtering an animal, because the people who gave this knowledge, they understood the esoteric knowledge behind blood and the consumption of blood. Let me get into explaining how blood is an intelligence and a medium of thoughts. Now, wherever you think inside your brain, often it leaves an imprint in your blood, all right? If you were to take the blood and then we scan it, all right, if we can have that machine, then it could project all the thoughts that you have thought. That is because blood is more like a memory disk, and it can store the thoughts that you think during the day. That is why it is not encouraged, all right? It is not encouraged to have negative thoughts of hatred, of anger, of envy, jealousy, because in a way it becomes a poison, all right? You think of it, it gets into your bloodstream, and then that sort of vibration creates a conflict inside your body and can result in diseases. So as you create thoughts, be aware that you're leaving imprints in the blood. And like I've said, even the thoughts that your ancestors, right? Remember, you are just a mere cell, right? A mashup of two cells forming one. The thoughts of your ancestors have an impact on your present life today. Some characteristics in a family may be desirable, others may not, right? For example, the negative ones like alcoholism, witchcraft, or so on and so forth, those are not desirable, but 3 generations down the line, you can still find the information if the previous grandfathers or grandparents had carried out these activities, and you can still have the knowledge that they had simply because that information is stored in the cell. But if you see negative traits running through your lineage, it is upon you, all right, because you are now in this physical realm, it is upon you now to do the transformation and acquire the positive traits, all right? Say that, hey, my generation has been doing XY, but I'm never ever going to do that. And as a matter of fact, I'm never going to allow my child to do that. Your generation will pass, the next generation will pass, the future generations that is coming from you will be rid of this negative trait that came from your past ancestors. And people talk about generational curses that run in their family. For example, if someone places a curse on your grandfather, all right, then the curse can come through because it's an information load that is carried into the future generation. And you can get rid of the generational curse by stopping to repeat patterns that run in your family, right? Just observe the patterns that you're acquiring, which are positive ones, which are negative ones, get rid of that, and your body will start learning the new information, and eventually you'll be giving good traits even to your children. Trauma is something that is carried within the cell. The trauma of your great-grandparents can come and haunt you, okay? So it's not only your trauma, but also the trauma of the people of the past. If your parent inflicted some negative wounds on you, you must do the duty to cleanse yourself and not be as narcissistic to your child as your parent was to you. You are limiting the amount of trauma. The trauma that they would have to deal with is simply the trauma that they have acquired for themselves. So this lineage memory has even been scientifically demonstrated in lab experiments where one group of mice were given a signal, and in that signal they received something rewarding, and the other they received the same signal but they received an electric shock. And so these two groups, one group associated the same sound with rewards and the other associated the same sound with pain. And interestingly, the babies of the mice that received the shock could still associate this negative sound with some sort of anxiety, because once that trauma was strongly registered in the cells, then it's more like the future generations tend to pick on the same anxieties and fears and pains and so on and so forth. So if you're harboring negativity or thoughts of envy and so on and so forth, guess what you might give to your future generations? It's more and more negativity, and that is why they say that he's just more like his father, or he's just more as stubborn as his mother. And added to that, in some traditions, there was often emphasis on marrying within the community. With the British monarchy system, you had to marry into the royal circle, right? Because in order to preserve the royal blood. And in the Indian traditions, they also had the caste system where family from the higher ranks could not marry people of the lower caste system. These were simply restrictions that were put in place in order to prevent the mixing of the different bloods, bringing in some undesired traits into the community. And that was partly also because they understood the capabilities of blood to store memory. And even blood or blood cells have intelligence, okay? I'm getting more into things that can be proven scientifically. If blood detects a foreign object, all right, blood has the capability to sense an object that doesn't belong to the body and even launch an attack. That shows a way of intelligence. In blood transfusion, you can receive blood. When the blood cells itself detects that whatever is coming in is not compatible or is not hospitable, then blood will launch an attack and try to destroy these foreign cells. And one of the things that I'm so curious to learn about is the blood types, because besides just being a mere protein interaction issue, it also has a metaphysical significance, okay? The reasons why we have different types of blood could indicate our spiritual temperaments, and it's something that I'm still fairly investigating. I will soon come with a metaphysical explanation, because I believe it's not just simply mere the evolution as is explained. And so the bottom line is to understand that blood is sacred, all right? Don't mix blood. Blood not only has information about your genes and so on and so forth. It also contains a blueprint of your unseen spirit, the metaphysical spirit. It is not merely something to take light, because that is where your life resides. The reason why I do this mysticism series is to bring to light some of the principles to help people to reflect beyond what they just see on the physical. I intentionally avoid to share any occult or esoteric knowledge, because giving that knowledge to someone who simply wants to do things for the fun of it is more like giving a sharp knife to a child so that they can play with. The reasons why things like witchcraft and magic have all gone rogue is because some high knowledge often ends up in the hands of the naive, and then they put that into practice. That is not how it's supposed to be. It's not just supposed to be shared randomly, because it can do harm to more people than it can help. I would love to know what you think, or if you have any contribution, be sure to drop me a comment below. And if you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe. Cheers and have a great time.